The Rise of the Ogre. Episode 1, read by Joss Ackland. Are you sitting comfortably? Prelude. Murdoc Alphonse Niccals stood shaking at the side of the stage. As the line before him grew ever shorter, he knew that the inevitable moment of reckoning was rapidly approaching. He would have done anything to escape this humiliation. However, the only thing he feared more was the wrath of his sadistic father, stood yards behind him, ensuring that the child completed the agreed performance. Money had changed hands, and the deal had to be honored. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm-hearted welcome to little Murdoc Niccals as the small wooden boy Pinocchio singing, "I've Got No Strings." A muted round of applause rippled around the pub. There was a moment's silence. Murdoc stood rooted to the spot, resplendent in lederhosen, strap-on nose, and feathered alpine hat, his knees knocking together like a couple of castanets. As the delay continued, the audience started shifting in their seats. A booming voice from the back of the hall broke out, "Go on, get over it, my beer's getting cold." His father's thick leathery boot connected hard with Murdoc's backside, hurtling the young child onto the stage. "Start singing, you little son, or I'll smash your teeth in." The bright, blinding light shone straight into his eyes as the smell of warm beer, stale cigarettes, and cheap aftershave wafted across the pub. The music started up, and as Murdoc looked to the side, his eyes imploring to be spared this dignity-stripping ritual, his father growled his decision nice and clearly. The local Are You a Star talent contest was the bane of Murdoc's life. Each month, the local pub would hold this type of demeaning event. Talentless clods would enter, impersonating the big names of the day, gurning their way through soul-sapping performance after mindless performance. The prize? £2.50, and the chance to humiliate yourself further in the biannual county finals. If you were really good, you could then go on to make a cock of yourself on national TV.
Boys, back to an all-in chorus. Okay, fellas, here we go.
Murdoc's dad had often threatened to enter his son into this cattle show purely as another vague opportunity to make some fast dough, and had this month backed his claim.
Everything about this made me sick,
remembers Murdoc.
How these stinky old giffers were sitting in a knackered-out pub accepting this crap as entertainment, watching talentless people pointlessly impersonating other talentless celebrity stars, watching my bullying bastard father trying to work this game for cash. None of it worked. And listen, if you don't watch it, that's your future right there.
Murdoc swore from this moment on never again would he take to the stage under someone else's direction. He would wreak his revenge on this world of buffoons. You could say that was the day that Gorillaz was really born, he says now, from that seed of rejection, a rejection of all that kind of rubbish. Murdoc pauses for a moment, reflecting on the long-forgotten memory. He then looks up and says,
"Actually, I'm gobsmacked you've chosen to open your stupid book with this story."
Murdoc Niccals, spawn of Stoke. Murdoc Niccals was born in the stinking borough of Stoke-on-Trent on June the 6th, 1966. The exact whereabouts have never been verified, but it was rumoured that Murdoc's mother gave birth to him while still in residence at the Belphegor Sanatorium, a halfway house for the sick, the needy, and the incredibly bored. Whatever the truth behind this is, the infant Murdoc was found abandoned upon the doorstep of his nefarious father's house. Murdoc recalls,
"Oddly, everyone knew who my father was, but no one quite knew who my mother was, although there was quite a lot of vivid suggestions. I was just found as a baby on Sebastian Niccals' doorway one night when he came home from one of his sessions in the pub."
His father, Sebastian Jacob Niccals, or Jacob Sebastian Niccals, depending on who's asking, was a notorious booze hound, a gambler, womanizer, and ne'er-do-well, a man whose collection of dubious vices would put Bill Sykes to shame. He was thought to have squired a number of children in the area, and had spent most of his ragged life avoiding any form of work one way or another. Auspiciously, upon his return from the pub that fateful night, a filthy black raven stood perched upon Murdoc's swaddling, which should have given Sebastian at least some clue as to the alignment of the contents held within. Sebastian shooed away the oily, coughing creature and took this mopped-up bundle inside. One can only imagine the disappointment on his sozzled face when he unwrapped the surprise package.
Do you know what?
Says Murdoc.
I think if eBay had been invented at the time, he would have sold me online there and then. As it was, I had to endure years of his booze-sodden, venomous behaviour before he shipped me off to school, which I loathed just as equally. Yeah? I'm often asked why my behaviour is so crooked now. It's a lot clearer, isn't it? You know, when you see what manky loins I sprung from. Man hands on misery to man, you know. Actually, This Be the Verse would have been a killer song. Unfortunately, Philip Larkin never managed to write This Be the Chorus, which is essential for chart success, really. And, of course, it needs to come in within the first 45 seconds, or Radio 1 won't play it.
From the age of 7, Murdoc attended Sodsworth Comprehensive School, although from the first day he could frequently be found in the corridors during lessons. His form teacher, Mr. Graveldax, remembers Murdoc with a great deal of warmth as a scruffy, lovable attendee of the Sodsworth School. Murdoc Niccals remembers Graveldax. No, not him. I hated him. He was an appalling student whose time was better spent propping up walls outside of the classroom rather than inside, distracting the other pupils with his endless quacking noises and pointless malicious humour. Although I must admit, even then, he had charisma and a great knack of getting his acquaintances to see things the Murdoc Niccals way. He certainly stood out, but ultimately he was a stupid imbecile who often turned up smelling of whiskey.
Well,
reckons Murdoc.
It's better than turning up stinking of poppers.
By the age of 13, Murdoc had a notable reputation around Sodsworth, namely for truancy, puerile pranks, ugliness, poor personal hygiene, and generally unruly behaviour. Despite all this, he was also the target of much bullying, both from the pupils and the teachers. One boy in particular, Tony Chopper, a big, thick, meaty skinhead lump with arms like 2 racks of kebab meat, took a pointed dislike to our boy. School bully Tony Chopper remembers him as a creepy little runt.
Always stank like an unwashed jam cat. Ball sweat.
Chopper reflects.
I took a lot of pleasure in making his life a misery. Having said that, if I'd known what he was going to become, I probably would have acted, well, a bit different. See, I'm 42 years old now, and I spent last night stuck in shelving Happy Shopper. See, what does that make me?
Murdoc acquired quite a few names from Chopper. Nerdoc, Runt, Reject, Faceache, Oddsock, Wally Bollocks, Trenchfoot, Gaylord, Great Stinking Pile of Horse Dung. The list went on with new ones added daily. It was this protracted period of bullying that eventually made a man of Murdoc, and in the process, Murdoc earned himself the first of 8 fractures to his now legendarily wonky nose. Murdoc, tiring of his persecutor, rounded on Tony Chopper, unleashing an unstoppable tirade of razor-sharp wit and bilious venom. This tidal weight of rudeness rose to a crescendo, climaxing with Murdoc informing Mr. Tony Chopper that he was
useless, bloated, backward waste of space who'd probably end up getting a job holding up for sale signs on the corner of streets, only to then get himself fired and replaced by a bucket of soil. Pissed monkey would stand a better chance in life.
Pow! Tony's massive porky fist connected with Murdoc's face, shattering his nose and sending the young Niccals boy flying.
Success at last!
Murdoc had obviously hit a nerve in Chopper, his insults finally penetrating Chopper's thick, stupid hide deeply enough to reduce Tony to a blubbering mound of mindless thuggery. Despite the bloody nose, Murdoc knew he had him licked. That day, Murdoc skipped home merrily from school, the blood rolling down his broken, beaming face. He was on his way. Honing his ability to highlight people's shortcomings gave our intrepid Murdoc a newfound confidence. Most of Murdoc's subsequent teenage years were spent in a boastful riot of larceny, joyriding, animal baiting, fraud and arson, usually while knocking back bottles of Strongbow cider and shooting out the windows of houses with his air pistol. After a hard day's miscreant activity, Murdoc would then while away his evenings listening to records around his comrade's house. It was here that, amongst other things, he discovered the deep, dark, dulcet joys of Black Sabbath. The Brummy metal band were a second epiphany for Murdoc, shining a luminous beacon of light through the darkness. Murdoc began to imagine a golden future outside the festering, disease-ridden, bubonic hamlet that was Stoke-on-Trent. Black Sabbath's greatest hits collection, We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, was key.
Oh, yeah.
He recalls.
That turned my head right inside out. Actually, they were another catalyst for my venture into the old Satanism game. Them, Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey, and a very ingenious do-it-yourself Acme Satanist kit I bought at a jumble sale. But the very first thing, see, there was this bloke hanging around the Arndale Centre handing out leaflets, and I guess it was the whole riches on earth sort of sexual gluttony coupled with the opportunity for, alcoholic excess that first caught my eye. Aged 16, that's a very exciting proposition for a man on the move. So, as a look, I tried it out, and you know what? It fitted me like a glove. Heavy metal music and devil worshipping became my favourite pastimes. My brother Hannibal's tastes were more dub and punk-based, but I soaked it all up. Actually, it was my love of The Clash that eventually opened up the world of dub reggae to me. But my first true love was always heavy metal. Lovely, thick, gooey black metal. I don't think my brother liked it at all, though.
Hannibal Niccals broke Murdoc's nose for a second and third time. The crime this occasion was for playing Dio's We Rock album on Hannibal's personal turntable.
He got me into a lot of good music,
he says of his brother.
He's inside now, though, for, stealing hubcaps or something.
Not long after, Murdoc was pushed out of Sodsworth Comprehensive, leaving with only a single legitimate qualification, an international baccalaureate in antisocial anthropology. Murdoc explains,
I'd studied other cultures in quite minute detail. Their behavioural patterns, the way they communicate, and their cultural traditions. And I kind of took the piss out of it. I passed that exam with flying colours.
However, the hallowed halls of Stoke-upon-Trent Sixth Form College were never to beckon him further. As he recalls,
the combination of my devilish charms, my rapier wit, my love of music, all pointed me in the same direction. I decided, there and then, that I would spend my life as a star musician, sailing the high seas of Chianti, rocking and rolling around the world. I was a genie unleashed. Wit, charm, confidence, charisma became the weapons of my armoury, and I was unstoppable. To seal the deal, I began making negotiations with the big man below, if you get my drift. I knew I had what it takes to rule the airways, but it certainly doesn't hurt getting a little lift up from Beelzebub. So we came to an arrangement.
To mark that an agreement had been undertaken, Murdoc changed his middle name via deed poll from Alphonse to Faust. And in return, Murdoc took charge of Satan's own bass guitar, El Diabolo.
Great sound, really twangy,
Murdoc says, explaining its unique appeal. The contract between the two obviously bounced between lawyers for some length, because although the path ahead was now clear, it would be some time before Murdoc Niccals drank from the cup of success. Murdoc went through a variety of low-paid jobs in order to pay the rent required to stay in his father's home. Gravedigger, soup seller, telesales, part-time Christmas Santa, even stealing the lead off church roofs. Admittedly, not actually a job, but all the same he needed the money. How desperate did he get?
Well,
He says.
I did think about giving Sir Alan Sugar a good vigorous tromboning one time. I think £100 was the agreed sum. At the last minute I thought, oh, fuck it, I'm better than that. He was just called Alan at the time. He still made me call him Sir, though. That story's totally true,
He maintains. Throughout these years, Murdoc formed many bands with various lineups, none of which seemed to go anywhere. Among these was the terribly amateurish new romantic band Patchouli Clark, a sad, pointless mixture of vaguely gothic keyboards and Murdoc's strangled crow-like crooning. They were never signed.
Yeah, whatever.
He says now.
I always knew I was going to be king of the world at some point, but, it didn't happen with my first band. Big deal.
Years upon years passed of unsuccessful attempts to crack stardom. Kiss and Make-up, Bullworker, Crimson Backdraft, Motley Dude, The Stupid Name Gang, Durango 95, Two's a Crowd. The list of shame goes on. Murdoc explains,
Eventually I knew I was wasting my time casting pearls before swine. Yeah? My voice is for the true connoisseur, the specialists. And I came to see if I was going to communicate the true brilliance of my songwriting skills to the wide audience that they deserved, and I was going to have to find someone with a more conventional vocal talent. The fact of the matter is that in 1997, the charts were a joke. These people wouldn't know decent music if it came up and smashed them around the chops. I had a plan that had turned not only the top 40, not just England, not just the music industry, but the whole entire world on its head. Everything.
if Murdoc was ever to really realize his dream and escape the dirty, filthy, rotting, garbage-filled, putrid cesspit of Stoke-on-Trent, he was going to have to take his master plan to another level. This meant recruiting a band worthy of his talents. Meanwhile, in another part of England, Crawley, Newtown, a much, much better singer was taking shape. Extracted from The Rise of the Ogre by Gorillaz, published by Penguin Books.